Cameron Van Hoy is a writer, producer, actor, and director who grew up with a love of cinema. When he was young, he used to make home movies by recording puppets in front of a video camera. He later wanted to act, so at a very young age, he started doing community theater in San Diego. He lived there with his mom, who was very supportive of him. While acting in community theater, he was recognized for his talents, and someone suggested they go to LA, which they did. They lived in San Diego, but would frequently head into LA for auditions. After spending some time in the city, he landed his first role in the movie Pups, with Burt Reynolds and a young Misha Barton. After that, he was in One Small Hero, and scored a recurring role as the voice of Big Gino in the cartoon Hey Arnold. His mother was tired of living in San Diego and decided to move back to New York, which was where she was originally from. While in New York, he was enrolled in the High School for the Performing Arts, which was a school from the movie Fame. He spent his days going to the Brooklyn Library, where he rented as many movies as he could. He watched movie after movie, which helped him to decide that he didn't want to act. He wanted to direct. Van Hoy was growing up in the 90s during the indie film revolution. Numerous incredibly talented directors were coming onto the scene and giving Hollywood a run for their money. Guys like Quentin Tarantino, Robert Rodriguez, Kevin Smith, Richard Linklater, and Doug Liman were all directors making these smaller indie films that were dominating pop culture. Van Hoy and his friends would frequently talk movies, and most often, they were quoting something from Clerks or Reservoir Dogs. Speaking of Reservoir Dogs, Van Hoy loved crime films. Everything from mafia movies like Goodfellas or The Godfather, to Pulp Fiction and Blood Simple. There was just something fascinating about the seedy underbelly of the world. Van Hoy had a rough time living in New York. Growing up with a single mom wasn't easy. In New York in the early 2000s, he was growing up around criminals, which was partially responsible for his interest in crime films. After high school, he moved to Los Angeles and briefly went to film school at the Art Institute of LA. Since he was in LA, he went about grinding out scripts and producing. He worked on some shorts but really wanted to make his own full feature-length crime drama. With his love of the genre, he wanted to make a cool little crime thriller that had the spirit of the films from the 90s. He started working on a script he wanted to helm himself. It was about a very tumultuous time in the life of an assassin called Tied Up. He had the basic foundation, but wasn't happy with it in its current form, so he decided to put it on the shelf and return to it later. In the meantime, he wrote, directed, and produced shorts like Love After Life, Rehearsing, and Dirty Talk. In 2017, he produced the satirical horror film Tragedy Girls, which went on to gain a lot of attention in the film festival circuit and won numerous awards. About a year after the release of Tragedy Girls, he returned to Tied Up and rewrote it. It was now about an assassin named Joe Doyle who has a job go wrong and he kidnaps a witness who saw the whole thing. He keeps her tied up at his house while trying to decide what to do with her. To complicate matters, he was living with his fiercely protective mother who wants him to kill the girl. The character of the mother was inspired by his own mom. He said his mother was so strong, if she had to, she would absolutely kill someone to keep him safe. He changed the title from Tied Up to Flinch, a name that would explain itself within the film. On top of his love for crime films, Van Hoy also had an affinity for film noir. He wanted to make sure to incorporate many noirish elements into Flinch. He was happy with what he had and set about getting funding to make the feature. After years of producing, he made numerous connections and was able to finance most of it himself with some additional investors. With the budget in place, he started casting. The first person he wanted on board was Buddy Duress. He saw him in the 2017 film Good Time with Robert Pattinson and knew he could play an excellent villain. There was a problem though. Duress was actually a criminal. When Duress was acting in his first film, Heaven Knows What, there was a warrant out for his arrest. He managed to get through filming, and the day after the movie wrapped, he got busted and went to jail. When the film premiered in the New York Film Fest in 2014, he was doing time at Rikers Island. He was now out of jail, and even though he was a convicted felon, they decided that he was too good to pass up, and they cast him in the film. Although this would come back to haunt them later. Next, they went looking for who would play the lead, Joe Doyle. They needed a young actor, not a movie star, someone powerful but silent, who could give a look that would convey more than just words. This proved to be the hardest part of casting. For all the people they saw, there were many that were good, but just didn't have the right grit. They were too polished, and they could play the role, but just wouldn't be believable. The audience would know most of them weren't from the streets. They hunted high and low until finally seeing actor Daniel Zavato. He'd been acting since 2011, and had been in a few well-regarded horror films like It Follows and Don't Breathe. When he met with the director, he was perfect. Zavato had just the right amount of edge they needed for the role, and they happily cast him in the lead. Zavato's agent introduced them to Tilda Cobham Hervey, who they also represented. Immediately, the director wanted her in the film as Mia. She had the classic noir look he knew would lend perfectly to his vision. After that, they were able to get the talents of Stephen Bauer, actor-comedian Tom Segura, and character actress Kathy Moriarty to play Joe's mother Gloria. He needed a rich bad guy, someone who was a real soulless degenerate. The character had so much money he no longer cared about anyone or anything. For that, he hired actor Daniel Proval. Proval was an actor who'd been in everything from Mean Streets to Innocent Blood to The Shawshank Redemption. He was extremely well-versed in playing a bad guy. They were getting ready to start filming when Buddy Duress went to talk to the director. He asked if it would be okay if he left the production after 4 days of filming because he had to go back to the East Coast to take care of something. Van Hoy thought that was fine. They could schedule the shoot around the day and then pick back up when he returned. Unfortunately, he started to notice something was off. Duress's story kept changing, and he seemed nervous. Finally, Van Hoy confronted the actor and asked him to tell the truth. Duress admitted he had to leave to go back to be seen in front of a judge for breaking his parole. Now Van Hoy was nervous. If he went back and they denied his parole, they'd have to scrap what they filmed with Duress and recast his role. He met with his lawyer and decided the risk was worth it. If he didn't come back, they'd suck it up and recast, taking the loss. They hoped that wouldn't happen, but they were ready in case it did. What happened next surprised everyone. Duress really loved the film and didn't want to take the chance of being denied parole and missing out on being in the film. So he just decided to stay and skipped his parole hearing so he could shoot the film. Van Hoy asked him if that was what he really wanted to do, and he said yes. He believed in the production and absolutely wanted to be a part of it. So now with everything in place, they started filming in August of 2019. They shot the whole production in and around locations in Los Angeles. Filming went off with just the usual smaller production problems, like trying to keep everything on track and within the budgetary limitations. Thankfully, this was nothing terribly out of the ordinary or anything the director couldn't handle. Principal photography took about a month and a half to complete. After filming, Van Hoy worked with the edit as much as possible. Eventually, it got to the point where he needed to film some pickup shots to make it bigger and fix some things, which is common in just about every film ever made. He needed to shoot some additional scenes with Buddy Duress, but when he tried to contact him, he couldn't find him anywhere. He tried repeatedly to no avail, so finally, in an act of desperation, he took a flight out to New York to visit him. He didn't know where he was living, he just had the address where his checks from the movie went. When he arrived at the address, it was his mother's house. After speaking with her, she told him he was currently in jail on Rikers Island for theft. Van Hoy then headed out to see him. When he arrived, Duress saw him and said, "What the fuck are you doing here?" Van Hoy responded, "I'm trying to finish the movie." The director worked with Duress's mother to get enough money to bail him out, and then returned to LA to finish his scenes. Additional filming took about 6 days. After Duress filmed his scenes, he was arrested on charges of menacing and criminal possession of brass knuckles, as well as carrying a controlled substance. He was promptly sent back to Rikers Island. One thing Van Hoy knew when he was working on the film was that he wanted a synthwave score. He was a fan of the musician Michael Glover, better known as Miami Nights 1984, and was overjoyed when he agreed to do the score. After the headaches the director went through getting distribution for Tragedy Girls, he decided to release the film independently under his label Ardor Pictures. That way he'd have complete control over the film. The movie wasn't shown at film festivals, and aside from a few industry people, some agents for business reasons, as well as lucky folks like me, the film is yet to be seen. With COVID shutting down movie theaters and studios, it ended up benefiting the film. Van Hoy got a call from a theater chain that was in desperate need for product. Because of the Warner Brothers deal with HBO and other studios holding their films back, theater chains were suffering from a severe lack of content. Initially, Flinch was slated to only go direct-to-video, but now it's going to have a short 2-week theatrical run, as well as a video-on-demand release, something that wouldn't have been possible if things were normal. So right now the film will be released in theaters on January 15th, and video-on-demand on January 21st, 2021. Flinch is an amazing movie. It shows how the talent in front of and behind the camera can overcome many budgetary limitations. Also, most importantly, is the script. Van Hoy smartly knew to keep things on the small scale and make it a very personal, claustrophobic film. Much of the movie takes place indoors and is dialogue heavy, which works because the people delivering the lines are all interesting. You don't doubt for a second that these are bad people who will do bad things. Also, there's a fair amount of action in the film, which helps to balance out the drama. Doyle's a sympathetic criminal, and you understand that he's been pushed into this situation. Mia's caught up in this mess, and I truly never knew what was going to happen to her. The actors were all terrific. Everyone in the cast gave an excellent performance. Also, I love the synthwave score. It perfectly elevates the production and was absolutely the right choice for the film. The whole thing is riveting and reminded me so much of the many amazing character-driven crime films of the 90s, a genre that is almost non-existent today. For me, this is one of those rare times when a film has both style and substance, a crime thriller that channels the greats from the past while simultaneously forging its own path. Flinch is a gritty crime drama that proves you don't need hundreds of millions of dollars to make this type of film. Actually, I think a big budget would have spoiled it. Often an excess will lead to excess polishing and softens all those edges to dull corners. By keeping things contained, the movie has the right amount of grittiness, which helps to pull you into this dark, crime-ridden tale.